This is episode 1 of a brand new podcast about the biggest problem brands experience: getting great engagement with their customers and their prospects.
It's about making customers love you. It's about creating amazing experiences. And we have amazing guests for that, John. We have a lineup. I won't go into great detail. Major names, including an author of a major book in this space. So it is the CMOs and the mentors of the CMOs. It just won't stop.
I'm super excited about it. I've seen the names. We're talking Fortune 100 companies here. It's impressive. The first person, however, that we are starting with is the CMO of CleverTap. And I'm super excited to have him on the show today. Peggy, what was one insight from what he shared with us that you particularly appreciated?
So what I thought was interesting is the insight, and he put it so well, right, is the point that we have this perception that engagement is up to and including a goal, usually a conversion, sometimes a purchase, transaction, what have you. And when you hit that, you're home free. But that is when the work starts. And that is so fundamental, but you have to have it spelled out that way.
Absolutely. And one other big takeaway from me from what Dave is going to share here is the result of great engagement is almost always better, more loyal customers. And that means greater share of wallet and more loyal in recommending you to friends. Without further ado, Dave Dabbah, CMO of CleverTap.
For brands and for companies, Dave, what does engagement mean?
It really means that customers are involved and completely connected with those brands. At the end of the day, engagement is all about building community for a brand.
How do you measure it?
Good question, John. A lot of different ways of measuring engagement, but ultimately, the best way of measuring engagement is how often a particular consumer is engaged with your brand. You sort of set that against what you believe the engagement metrics should be for your specific brand. So if you have a brand that you believe a particular customer should be viewing 5 times a month, you need to measure against that goal to determine how often your brand is actually really getting in front of that consumer.
So you need to be realistic around the metrics. What about the result? What is the result of great engagement for a brand?
The result of great engagement is almost always better customers. Customers who are very loyal to your brand. Now, they can be loyal to your brand in terms of what they say to their friends and family. They can be loyal to your brand with their wallets. But at the end of the day, great engagement is really about your customers being as involved with your brand as possible.
Amazing. Can brands quantify the value of great engagement, what they get as a result?
Yeah, brands can absolutely do this. They have to really sort of look at retention, how word of mouth works in their specific industry, and how they're actually really connecting with people around the actual value of the specific brand that you have.
So Dave, we understand the value of engagement. We understand what brands get out of it, but they can also make mistakes on this course. So what is a big mistake, the number one mistake brands make around engagement?
Yeah, the number one mistake brands make is they actually think the engagement is over with the first purchase of a product. It is a huge mistake that a lot of brands make. The reality is engagement and retention is something that happens over time, and it should never stop with just a first purchase, if you will. it is really all about building community and building a long-lasting relationship with their customers, and that is one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of companies make, is they simply get that first purchase and the engagement ends.
I love that answer. I can just imagine the whole marketing team, right? You know, the brand was great, and the
Yeah.
ads team put out the right ads, and the sales worked, right? The retail site worked, or the app where they were selling something worked, and somebody actually bought something, and everybody's going, "Yay, we won!" And it's just the beginning. It's the first
That's the
inning.
beginning.
It's the first quarter.
That's the beginning, and they actually lose if they don't get you back again. What you're really after when it comes to engagement, regardless of the industry or vertical that you're in, regardless of the service that you're trying to sell, all that really matters is that customers feel like they're receiving the kind of content that they ultimately want to receive directly from from the vendors and the companies that they work with. I think we think about engagement in a very one-dimensional way, and where things are headed is far more complex than that in the future.
Very, very interesting. It's not just about what a brand is doing, it's about what the customer is doing, and it's about some interplay between that, and very, very finely detailed is what you're saying, because it could be different at different times of the day, different times of the year, perhaps, other things like that. How do you measure it?
All sorts of ways of measuring it. It's also a question of, what's the metric that's important to you? Some of our customers, the metrics that are important to them at the beginning of a sales process or an app download process is churn. They certainly don't want to see a lot of churn ever, but what kind of churn happens at the beginning of the process is usually where you start. The second place is a customer that is a customer. You've got customers that are real customers over a long period of time that purchase a certain amount of product from you. And so we like them to look at those purchase numbers over the course of a month at least, and really sort of understand what the average purchase looks like. Specifically, if we're talking about e-commerce, streaming services and entertainment services that use CleverTap. While we wouldn't use the word purchase, it's the same thing when it comes to viewership, and then responding to recommended content. And those things become extraordinarily important to those streaming services out there.
What a great kind of differentiation point, Peggy. I mean, what Dave's talking about is somebody who buys from you once, a point in time. Is that really a customer, or is it somebody who just bought something from you, versus somebody who has a relationship with you, ongoing communication both ways, multiple purchase points, perhaps a subscription relationship? That's more of a customer. Would you agree?
That is absolutely what's going on here. And what Dave is also talking about is that you're thinking about time, intent. I'm looking at how often they're engaging. I'm understanding that engagement. It's a relationship. I wanted to get to my question, which is a segue here. You're talking about making your customers comfortable and making them feel engaged. You're talking about time and intent, that those are part of this equation. But ultimately, what I'm hearing here is also, it's about relevancy. So every brand wants to be relevant. Is that the point here, that relevancy is part of strengthening that engagement? Or how do you see relevancy, Dave?
So you have to ask yourself this question from an app and a brand perspective. What is it that will take an average user and turn them into a loyal user? Because that's where the real value is. The age-old question of, the right message to the right customer at the right time is as true today as it was 50 years ago.
And in the right channel, right?
In the right channel. That is right. And too many people lose focus off that. They think that this red widget this blue widget, everybody's going to want it. And everybody's going to, in the streaming services perspective, watch it. And that just is not the way the world actually works. Customer preferences, understanding the data and the trends that are occurring inside the apps are what drive the best levels of engagement, and that's ultimately what keeps people coming back.
That's really, really interesting, because what you're really talking about is customer centricity, right? I mean, what does my customer need? What does my customer want? Not what do I have? What are my needs as a marketer? What are my needs as a brand to sell more, to send more, to ship more, to get more out there, to get more views or more likes or whatever? It's about what that particular customer needs. I want to go into some of the process of engagement. And I was thinking about that. I was thinking it's kind of like, that special person that I see, maybe I'm in high school or middle school or something like that. And, I want them to notice me, to like me, to love me. And brands are like that, right? They want customers to notice them, to like them, to love them, to buy from them. How do you do that? How do you make that happen?
Yeah, it's like, why aren't more people listening to my podcast? How do I get them to do this or do that? Obviously, it's different. We'd have to have a 24-hour conversation. Targeting different brands and verticals, getting customers to respond to your brand from a sort of a loyalty perspective. Is really where I think people are really sort of struggling the most, and it's because they're not loyal enough with who they are as a brand. But ultimately, you really do need to be authentic about who you are as a brand when you're presenting that forward to your customers. Now, knowing who you are as a brand is something that a lot of brands struggle with. Some brands do this really well over a long period of time, and they're rewarded with a huge amount of loyalty.
We talk about marketing all the time. It's part science because it's data-driven, obviously. There's also magic in it, and there's magic to engagement. Where's the magic? Where's the science?
The magic really lies in the knowledge. The magic lies in the data. You guys are going to continue to hear over the next 24 months an insane amount of talk around AI and ML and what other cool acronyms we can come up with. You're going to hear a bunch of new ones. But at the end of the day, what kind of data does Puma have on Dave Dabbah? That's the question. And then how do they use that data in a artistic, creative, scientific way to not alienate me, but still provide me with what I'm looking for? And that's the secret sauce. Now, my purchasing habits are different than John's purchasing habits and are different than Peggy's purchasing habits. And while you can group us together holistically in large groups, you can say, group A does this and group B does this and group C does this. The real brands that are doing a really good job understand that everybody is their own data group.
You're talking about that being the ability to create this experience, to draw from this data. That's part of the magic. I get that. But can brands learn that?
Absolutely. I think a lot of brands have learned that. I mean, if you take, I've talked a lot about Puma, but I guess I should talk about Nike as well. And, Adidas and, all the other brands in sort of that space. They all have different needs at different times. If you think about like the Nike brand, they got into producing golf equipment. They had no business producing golf equipment, and they did it for like 20 years. And they finally said, we're done. We're out, but we're going to continue to produce golf clothing. And what they recognized was that their golf clothing was really where they were making money and providing the appropriate thing that they could do in that specific industry. So Nike as a whole, I mean, like they target, the world, they target a bunch of different sporting verticals, if you will. And so in each of those things, they understand, who their customers are and how to go get them. If you turn on, pre-COVID, if you turned on the television here in the States on a Saturday, how many of the college football teams would you see wearing Nike gear? How many would you see, playing basketball in March wearing Nike gear? So they've got different programs and different strategies for different verticals that they run, and what they understand most is, how to create an image up at the very top, like this big image that they have of the Nike brand, and the perception of the brand matters. And what Nike has done is they've taken that overarching sort of brand perception that they have as a consumer brand, and they've worked it into the into the business world in some very interesting ways. That's allowed them to expand their brand into collegiate sports, into professional sports, into businesses directly, into verticals you wouldn't even know they're involved in around the globe. And it all leads back.
What are some of the mistakes that brands make with engagement? How are they missing out on some of the opportunities that they have?
A lot of really good brands in the B2B space, as much fun as I make about, images and products being shown and everything, there are a lot of really good brands out there. And the brands that don't respond to me after I've signed up for something in any way, I don't understand it. Somebody, if I download a white paper or download a case study, I expect to see an email in my inbox right away.
Instantly.
Instantly. All right, I'll give you 5 minutes, occasionally here and there. I expect to see. I
would not give them the 5 minutes. I do want it instantly because, I've done that form. I'm in the moment. I am in the flow. And then I head over to my email and I want to see it right away. And guess what? If I don't get it right away, I may never see it again.
I'm with you. And what's even more disturbing than, not receiving that email right away is that I'm not looked at as a sales opportunity. I download a case study. I attend a webinar that a B2B brand is creating. Why am I not being sold something? I for the life of me, don't understand. So I think it's the lack of execution that I sort of see inside a lot of B2B companies that could easily be tightened up. Now, what I do understand about this is, the bigger a company gets, the harder it is to move. Like some of the most simplistic things in the world, right? If you were 2 or 3 people on a marketing team and you needed to set up automated campaigns to email people after they've went to a webinar and then hook that to a sales rep, I'd be able to do that in an afternoon. But take a 100-person sales org with a database of 100,000 records already in it, and you've just asked for too much, John. So it's efficiencies have to be put in place, and I think a lot of companies struggle with that.
You're talking about relationships with customers. There's relationships in the company, and when you're talking about what does engagement bring, what does it matter? It's also a matter of measuring it. And I'd like to start off with just understanding how, from your perspective, speaking as a CMO, how that relationship needs to look, just to start. And then I'm going to drill a little deeper, Dave. So stick with me, okay?
You got it. So it's always a good question. My perspective has always been CFO, CRO, which is like one of the newer titles in this world that we live in today. So former VP of Sales, which is now called a CRO, and CEO. It's always good to have a strong working relationship with those folks. I'm not saying that there isn't confrontation, and I'm not saying that there shouldn't be serious discussion, but specifically on the CFO front, some CFOs are happy to say, okay, here's a budget. Here's your budget, which generally, from a CMO perspective, the way I think about it is I go to, especially in the B2B space, I go to our sales team. I say to them, what are you guys trying to accomplish this year? And they tell me, and then I turn around and I build a budget around being able to provide that for them. That's how it works. And so I go to the CFO and I say, okay, this is my budget, and this is where the money's going to be spent. Now, the CFO will certainly say, where's the ROI, Dave? Where's the return on investment going to be? And then I always say, you see a billboard on the side of the road. How do you really know what the return of investment is there? And you're in a B2B business. We're in a B2B business, so it's different than consumer businesses. Whereas a CMO in a consumer business can actually really get down to the specific details of what something costs to bring in a new customer and then to bring in customers at scale. And when you're in the B2B space, there's a lot more gray that exists there, because you do have to run those billboards on the side of the freeway. Now, I use that as more of a metaphor, because you're running virtual billboards, you're running expensive PPC campaigns that, if you just looked at the results from those PPC campaigns and the Google spend on its own, you would never spend a dime there again. And you look at it and you're like, this is crazy. I'm not seeing anything out of it. But what you really are getting out of it is very important. And that is brand recognition. When you're sitting down with the CFO, you have to explain to them, especially as a B2B CMO, that it's all about brand recognition. And how do you effectively build brand recognition? Now, IBM put out a great study. It was probably about 4 or 5 years ago, and they were trying to uncover, how many times does somebody need to see a brand for it to have any impact on them? And this was more targeted at the consumer space, and the number was in the 20s. So
I remember. Yes,
that's right. So now you're in a B2B space and you're trying to grow your B2B business. You have to take have a consumer sort of approach to it for a wide variety of reasons. And so to say that somebody needs to see the CleverTap brand 40 or 50 times before they're ready to take any action, absolutely. And that's not a bad thing. And so you have to explain that to the CFOs so that they understand that it isn't as ROI driven as they want it to be.
Mm-hmm.
The interesting part there, just to ping in before you go with your follow-up question, Peggy, is that in the B2B space, it's not just one person that needs to see your brand those 30, 40, 50 times. It's probably a team making the decision. It's probably somebody bringing it to his or her boss. It's that boss possibly bringing it to somebody else as well. And they all have to have some familiarity, unless you want a total cold open with the person who can actually say yes. If they've seen that brand 20, 30, 40, 50 times, oh yeah, that company, I've seen them. They do good things. Don't they work with that and that brand? Don't they do this? Excellent. Easy to sign that check. If it's a total, I don't know you, who the heck is that? Give me a reason why we're spending spending this amount of money with that company. That's critical. It makes B2B quite a bit harder.
Which brings me to some thinking I'd like you to weigh in on, Dave. Okay. New, fresh thinking, because CMOs, yourself included, but not you, Dave, just talking about the group. They have the shortest tenure in the C-suite, not you, but there's that thinking, okay, so what needs to happen so that marketing really has impact? And there's thinking gaining traction that it's the CMO with the CFO closer together. And in fact, this type of teamwork is being called digital marketing's new power couple. I'd like you to weigh in on that.
Okay. So this will be controversial, and maybe you guys like this. I think it's silly. The power couple, specifically for B2B businesses, is always the CRO and the CMO. And no offense to all of the
We're
CFOs.
sending this to the CFO, by the way.
Yeah, I know. I was going to say no offense to all of the CFOs I'm about to offend. But the truth is, you're the second or third person I'm going to call for a date. This kind of stuff. And, and Peggy's absolutely right, too. Average life expectancy of CMO or VP of marketing, that level has been, hovering around 24 months. And it's actually, it's actually hard for a CMO to even last that long.
Yes.
And, the reasons are, pretty simple. Is it takes time to get process. It takes time to implement programs and to really get those things off the ground. And it takes a special sort of executive team to sort of recognize that it's going to take time, that, stuff doesn't happen overnight. Most CMOs are not sitting on, $50 million ad budgets. What they have to do, where they have to spend their money, and how they have to get there, don't always match. There's not always enough money to get you there. So you have to modify things. But back to Peggy's question, I'm definitely spending more time courting the CRO. And it's not so much about courting the CRO. It's about working really closely with the CRO. I want and insist, and I'm an easy guy to work for, but I want and insist that all of my marketing team members, and we're going through this now at CleverTap, but like all of my marketing team members are embedded with the sales organization. They are there. They're on the weekly sales calls. Our marketing team connects with the head. We have 6 different regions, so they connect with the heads of the regions on a weekly basis. Whichever marketer is in charge of a region, we want them to do spot calls into the SDR group that sits inside those regions. Jump on sales calls with the sales reps, be part of the events. That's how you become really successful in the B2B space rapidly, is when you have instant response on what's working and not working between sales and marketing. CFO part doesn't matter as much other than once a year. And I do want to throw out one thing real quick, because I do just want to say this. I love my current CFO. I'm giving him and his entire team a
big hug, big kiss,
a virtual hug right now. Because like we do have like really strategic conversations that are important, and where the CFOs actually really do help me as a CMO is when we start looking at market potential. So we'll take for example Latin America. I joined CleverTap not long ago. In looking at our regions and looking at our sales, I sat down with our finance team and our CFO, and I said, okay, where do you see the opportunity for us? And when we sat down, we looked at it, we said, Latin America looks like an obvious place for us to spend and increase resources. There's a lot of good that really does come from from that whole CFO piece, which is important, which ultimately leads back to your question about engagement. And I'm going to do this from the customer perspective now, which is, our customers, when they're trying to engage with their customers, they absolutely need to understand what it is that particular customer is interested in. And if they can do that, then they're going to be successful in figuring out how to communicate with them.
Let's take a step back here, Dave, and talk a little bit about why we're talking here, what we're doing, the mission at CleverTap and the mission with this show. What do you really want to achieve?
Yeah, we sort of took a look at the if you will, the podcasting and vlog sphere, and we said, that there isn't really a great engagement and retention podcast / vlog in the marketplace, and our true intention here is really to connect marketers and growth leaders with industry leaders who have been, very successful in their respective verticals in building, fantastic engagement and retention strategies. Because at the end of the day, as a marketer and as a growth leader, we're really all in the business of serving our customers in a concise way that keeps them connected with our brands without sort of scaring them away by spamming them with a ton of messages. So at the end of the day, it is really all about strategies and engagement that works, that's coming from leaders who have done this in the past.
In terms of CleverTap, you're doing a rebrand there, and we wanted to ping in on that and just see, hey, what's driving that? What's the messaging behind that? When's it going to get unveiled? Perhaps when this is actually published, perhaps not. But what's driving that, and what's the real message that you're going to embody with that new brand?
What I did with the brand is there were certain things I knew coming into the company to begin with. So I want to sort of be clear about that. There was a certain perception of the brand that I was aware of. Now, if you go to Bangalore, or if you go to Mumbai, the perception of the CleverTap brand is very strong. There is a strong following of the CleverTap brand there. So we have a couple different challenges. One, we have to keep the brand strong in India and in other parts of the world that we have strong brand recognition in. And then the other part of it is we have to figure out how to expand the brand in what I consider to be new markets. And so what we came up with when we sort of went back and we looked at the product, and we have some really big innovative news coming on the product as well. And I said to the guys, I said, you all remind me of Tony Stark from Marvel. I said, let me give it to you in the Tony Stark, mode. And I said, like with what you're doing on the product side of the fence, just on the back end side of it, it's absolutely fascinating to me. And, from a sort of feature perspective and some of the cool things that are coming out, I said, we sat down with our brand and design team and we said, let's be inspired by what Tony Stark would do. If Tony Stark was here, what would he do? So we sort of had a little bit of that attitude in the room as we were working on the rebrand. But what you get from the rebrand, and I think I mentioned this a couple times, which is CleverTap is ultimately in the business of helping our customers, and so that's what we're in the business of. And what we've sort of done with the rebrand / refresh is we've brought a lot of that to light. We're using a more of a consumer flair approach to it. We will be really one of the only brands that really utilizes sort of consumer marketing tactics in its B2B brand. And that is vastly different than anybody else. If you look at almost all of the companies, like what is the first thing you see when you look at their website? It's a picture of their product. It's a picture of the product. You scroll down and you see another picture of their product, and then you click on the product and you get yet another picture of the product. And it's not about the product per se, as much as it's about how the product helps our customers get more. And that's the position that we're in. CleverTap's really in the business of helping our customers locate, content and products that they're most interested in.
Thank you so much, Dave. This has been wonderful. It's been amazing. Peggy and I have really enjoyed this. Peggy, I'm speaking for you, but I think you've really enjoyed these sessions as well.
No, absolutely. And I'm looking forward to doing exactly that, lifting the lid on some brands. I know what the pipeline looks like. Some companies, you wouldn't think of them, but they're doing amazing things.
And some companies that you have heard of,
Oh,
one
yes.
might be kind of the biggest or most original computing company on the planet. One might
Absolutely.
be a massive payments giant with literally trillions of transactions every month. So we're going to have that. It's coming. It's cool. It's awesome. It's going to be here on CleverTap Engage. Thank you again, Dave. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, everybody. And I love the tease for Big Blue.
What is Big Blue? Nobody said Big Blue. Anyways, thanks so much. Have a great day.